friends. Let me talk to you on the current topic, namely the microorganisms. So, the microorganisms or the microbes, which are commonly known as the microscopic organisms, they are found all around us and even inside our bodies. So, the category microbes or the microorganisms, it includes a massive range of organisms. It is not only bacteria, it includes the bacteria, fungi, viruses, algae, the archaea, protozoa, etc., etc. So the microorganisms, as their name itself implies, are so small that they usually require a microscope to see. And the vast majority of the microbes on the earth, they pose no real threat to the human beings or even to the plants or animals. In fact, they actually work along with the humans to take the world or to make the world go round, aiding decomposition, decay, and even helping us to digest our food. However, there are some microorganisms which negatively impact our lives, causing illness, bad odors, and damaging the products and surfaces. And they also cause malaria, the bird flu, etc., etc. So, we will briefly explore some major divisions within the microorganisms and let us highlight some interesting facts. So, first coming to bacteria, perhaps the most well known microorganisms, they have no nucleus within the cell and contain the organelles. They contain no organelles. So, they have no nucleus within the cell and they contain no organelles. So within the bacteria, again, there are two categories, two classes, namely the gram-positive bacteria, which have thicker cell wall, and the gram-negative bacteria, which have a thinner layer sandwiched between an inner and the outer membrane. So the bacteria are the only microorganisms which can live harmlessly within the human body, often aiding the bodily functions such as the digestion. So, in fact, there are more bacterial cells within the human body than the human cells themselves, and they are too smaller in size. So, only relatively few bacteria are dangerous, and these bacteria, they cause the most problems in terms of disease in humans. And the second category is the fungi. They have a defined nucleus and the organelles. So these cells are larger than the bacteria. Fungal colonies, they are also visible to the human eye once there is a certain level of growth. For example, the mold on bread. The fungi can be split into three main groups, namely one, the molds which display the thread-like growth and the multicellular structures. Number two, the yeasts, which are typically single-celled. And number three, the mushrooms, which possess a fruiting body for the production of the spores. And the fungi can be problematic and it contains significant pathogens which can cause the disease in plants. However, we also recognize the organisms from this group from the widespread use in the food industry for the production of the foodstuffs, including beer. Manufacture of beer. So viruses are considered by many experts as the non-living organisms. So viruses, they are the most important microorganisms. So they essentially consist of the nucleic acid, that is DNA or RNA, and a protein coat. So virus particle requires a host cell. This is most important in order to replicate, in order to multiply itself. So once a virus enters a human cells and hijacks it, using the human cell again, it replicates, it multiplies itself. So in many cases, the immune system, it detects the presence of the virus and it takes action, leaving us with the symptoms of a common cold or the influenza. And some viruses, they can cause permanent and irreversible damage to the cells like the HIV viruses. And the other category of microorganisms is the algae. So the algae are a more difficult to define group of organisms, more difficult to define group of organisms, and they are typically found in the marine environments. And one view is that they are essentially small aquatic plants, and there are other groups such as the archaea and the protozoa, which are less well known to us. So the epidemics caused by the viruses began when the human behavior changed a few thousand years ago. So when humans became densely populated agricultural communities. So this allowed the viruses to spread rapidly and subsequently to become endemic. So viruses of the plants and the livestock, they also increased. And as humans became dependent on agriculture and farming, diseases such as the potty viruses of the potatoes and the rinderpest of the cattle, they had devastating consequences. See, the smallpox and the measles viruses, they are among the oldest that infect humans. So having evolved from the viruses that infected other animals, they first appeared in humans in Europe and North Africa thousands of years ago. So the viruses were later carried to the New World by the Europeans during the time of the Spanish conquests. As they had no natural resistance, these people, the Spanish, had no natural resistance to the viruses. Millions of them died during the epidemics. And the influenza pandemics, what we call, they have been recorded since 1580 itself, and they have occurred with the increasing frequency in subsequent centuries also. So the pandemic of 1918 and 19, it was the most devastating, in which millions of people died in less than 1 year. And we are aware that Louis Pasteur and Edward Jenner, they were the first to develop the vaccines to protect against the viral infections. The nature of viruses remained unknown until the invention of the electron microscope in the 1930s. So when the science of virology gained momentum. So in the 20th century, many diseases, both old and new, were found to be caused by the viruses. There were epidemics that were only controlled following the development of a vaccine in the 1950s. And the HIV is one of the most pathogenic new viruses to have emerged in centuries. Although scientific interest in them arose because of the diseases they cause, but most viruses are beneficial to the mankind. They drive evolution by transferring the genes across the species. They play important roles in the ecosystems, and they are also very much essential to the human life. So over the past several centuries, as modern humans increased in numbers and they dispersed throughout the world, the new infectious diseases, they emerged, including even those caused by the viruses. So earlier, the humans lived in the small, isolated communities, and most epidemic diseases did not exist then. Smallpox, which is the most devastating viral infection in history, first emerged among agricultural communities in India several thousand years ago. So the virus which only infected the humans, it probably descended from the pox viruses of the rodents. Humans probably came into contact with these rodents, and some people became infected by the viruses they carried. So when viruses cross the so-called species barrier, their effects can be severe, and humans may have had little natural resistance. So the contemporary humans lived in small communities, and those who became victims to the infection either died or developed immunity. So people who did not die or who sustained this, they developed immunity. So this acquired immunity, what we call, it is only passed on to the offspring temporarily by antibodies in the breast milk and other antibodies that cross the placenta from the mother's blood to the unborn child. So other epidemics of the viral diseases, which depend on the large concentrations of the people, such as the mumps, the rubella, and polio. So they also became very, very, devastating. Slowly, when humans became the farmers and began to domesticate the animals, pigs, cattle, goats, sheep, horses, camels, cats, and dogs. So these were all kept and bred in captivity. So these animals would have brought their viruses with them. So the transmission of viruses from the animals to the human, it can occur, but such what we call as the zoonotic infections, they are rare, and subsequent human to human transmission of the animal viruses is even rarer. So although there are notable exceptions such as the influenza. So most viruses are the species specific and would have posed no threat to the humans. And the herpes viruses first infected the humans few thousand years ago. The humans have developed a tolerance to these viruses. And more recently evolved viruses, they cause epidemics and the pandemics. On this again in the next round, we will study in detail. That is on the recently evolved viruses which can cause or which causes the epidemics and the pandemics. Thank you.